Welcome to Let's Talk New Mexico. I'm Taylor Velasquez. A jury in New Mexico has found that social media giant Meta misled consumers about the safety of its platforms and endangering children. The owner of Instagram, Facebook, and WhatsApp must pay out $375 million in civil penalties. This is an historic decision as New Mexico becomes the first state to ever hold a tech company liable for harming young people. The state's original 2023 undercover investigation, Operation Metafile, resulted in the arrest of three suspected online predators who used the platforms to victimize children. Later that same year, the New Mexico Department of Justice would file a lawsuit alleging that not only are the platforms protective policies are lax, but also internal documents obtained by the department found that Meta was informed by internal warnings that they later ignored by their own employees, and that its algorithms enable child predators to solicit and harm children. In a statement released after the verdict, Meta disagreed, saying we work hard to keep people safe on our platforms and are clear about the challenges of identifying and removing bad actors or harmful content. They plan to later appeal. However, the state is not done yet with Meta. The Attorney General's office will bring its final claim to court in early May to seek additional monetary relief and require the company to make specific changes to the operation of Meta's platforms, including enacting effective age verifications and removing predators from its sites entirely. This morning, we'll discuss what it's like to come up into the next phase of this lawsuit and what the state hopes to change on social media to protect kids. How do you talk to your kids about the safety of social media and how they conduct themselves on their sites? Email letstalk@kunm.org or call in live at 505-277-5866. And we did reach out to Meta to participate in today's show, but they sent the statement instead. We respectfully disagree with the verdict and will appeal. We work hard to keep people safe on our platforms and are clear about the challenges of identifying and removing bad actors or harmful content. We will continue to defend ourselves vigorously, and we remain confident in our record of protecting teens online. And we also did reach out to the Attorney General's office for Raul Torres to come on our show. They couldn't make the show. However, we have an interview he did with the NPR show Here and Now, reacting to the jury handing down this decision.
A New Mexico jury has found that Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, knows about child exploitation on its social media platforms and is not doing enough to stop it. Meta is now liable for $375 million in damages. The company says it will appeal. New Mexico's Attorney General, Raul Torres, brought the civil suit against Meta and spoke to us when the trial began. Mr. Attorney General, welcome back to the program.
Thank you for having me.
The jury found Meta hid what it knew about child sexual exploitation on its social media apps, including Facebook and Instagram. Based on the evidence in the trial, what did Meta know?
Well, Meta's known for years that this is a dangerous product, an addictive product, and a product that actually facilitates predatory behavior on the platform. They've known that because of their own internal documents. Safety experts have been raising red flags and recommending specific changes. But again and again, executives, including Mr. Zuckerberg, have chosen and prioritized profits over safety. And because of that, the jury in New Mexico found them liable, found that their actions were willful, and rendered a $375 million judgment in our favor. And it's the first but not the last time that I think juries across this country are going to demand real accountability from Meta and social media companies writ large.
And for parents who are listening, parents of teens who are using these apps more broadly, what should they know about the dangers facing underage users today?
Well, first, they need to understand that the business model that drives this company is one that's really centered on engagement, and it's engagement at all costs. They want to keep kids connected to the platform. They should also understand that the same things that connect people with their likes and interests also connect predators on the platform with kids that are on the platform. And so both of those things together should give parents real concern about having kids accessing these platforms in ways that, frankly, at this point are not safe. And they should also understand that the company hasn't been honest about the dangers that they know exist in these spaces.
And part of your case was a state undercover operation that created a fake social media profile of a 13-year-old girl. What did that sting operation reveal?
Well, what we were trying to do through the establishment of an undercover account was to recreate the experience of a young girl on the platform. We wanted to see for ourselves what the response would be, and frankly, it was shocking. They were immediately inundated with solicitations for sex, requests for graphic material, and an explosive growth in the following of predominantly men from all over the world. And what's even more shocking is that in response to that growth on that particular account, rather than raising a red flag, the company sent information to the account about how they could grow their user base and how they could monetize that following. That's a clear example of what's wrong at the core of this company. They have continued to prioritize engagement over safety, and we found that very clearly through our undercover investigation.
Yours is the first in several state cases against Meta as we speak in LA. In Los Angeles, a jury is deliberating, as you know, over whether Meta and YouTube deliberately made their platforms addictive to children nationally. What do you hope comes of all this?
Well, I think this is the first crack in the dam. You know, Meta and other social media companies have been hiding behind Section 230 for years, despite the fact that we've known how dangerous
Section 230, which gives them some legal immunity from what is posted on their platforms, yeah?
Yeah, that's correct. Section 230 was created in a totally different era in the early days of the internet and has become a liability shield that they've hidden behind for years and years. Because this is effectively a products liability case brought under our consumer protection laws, there's an opportunity now to hold these companies accountable in a way that frankly has never existed before. And it's going to be a blueprint for what comes next. In terms of our own case, we will be back in front of the district court in May on our public nuisance claim. We'll be arguing that Meta has created a public nuisance, and we will, in addition to financial penalties, we'll be asking for injunctive relief, specific changes to the design features of the platform, the algorithm, elimination of end-to-end encryption for minors, and an independent monitor to really enforce those features and those changes. What it will also do is potentially create a roadmap or a blueprint for how this company could change its product offerings, not only around the country, but around the world.
Now, the jury in New Mexico has required Meta to pay $375 million, as you say, for violating state law. It was a fraction of what the state requested. And we're talking about a company that's worth $1.5 trillion. Financially, could this effectively be a slap in the wrist?
Well, we don't have any illusions that the fine that was rendered by the jury yesterday is sufficient deterrence to change their behavior. But if you think about the relative size of New Mexico and the user base here, if similar types of actions are brought in other jurisdictions, which I anticipate they will, the potential penalties will add up really quickly, and the financial impact on the company's bottom line will add up considerably. But I also think that the wave of litigation is going to prompt congressional action. I think it's going to prompt Congress to really re-examine Section 230 and some of the stalled legislation that's been pending there for quite some time. And when that happens, I think you're going to realize a sea change in the regulatory space in terms of what we expect of social media companies and the safety features built into their platforms.
Raul Torres is the Attorney General of New Mexico. Mr. Torres, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you so much.
And I would like to introduce my first guest this hour, Mark Berkman, CEO of the Organization for Social Media Safety. Good morning, Mark. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
And, we just heard from AG Torres, but I just want to break down just the overall dangers of social media. I mean, there's so many different platforms nowadays, and Meta does own a good chunk of them. But what are the most common dangers that users are exposed to?
Yeah, first, let me thank the Attorney General and his office for this work here. I think it's incredibly important. And your question, especially for families out there, almost all of whom have those families that have children within that kind of 4th grade to 12th grade range, their kids are almost certainly on some form of social media. And so the question of what dangers, what risks they may be exposed to is critical for them to know. The most common danger that we see on social media is cyberbullying. So that about 47% of teens across the country and older tweens as well, from 5th grade to 12th grade, we see self-report that they've been targeted for cyberbullying over social media. And that runs across demographics. It's really kind of any school that we're at as the Organization for Social Media Safety across the country. Then we see a range of mental health harms as well, which was part of this New Mexico case, from anxiety, depression, up to suicide. Also eating disorders, I should include as well. Those are all harms and threats. There is a range of harms in the sexual exploitation area, some of the worst case scenarios for parents to think about, from sextortion, so children being blackmailed or extorted once they send in sexually explicit content to someone that they think that they know, but they're really being catfished. So they're extorted to send more or to send money. Very dangerous one. We see about a third of 6th graders across the country are engaging in sexting type of behavior, which has a range of dangers linked to it as well. There is fraud, there is hate speech, there is violence and social media motivated violence. So there's I could keep going, and I know we don't have time for that, but there are a range of harms that parents and teens need to be aware of to protect themselves.
Definitely. And we'll get into a few of the harms coming up this hour, but I'm going to pause the conversation right here. This is Let's Talk New Mexico on 89.9 KUNM. I'm Taylor Velasquez. We're talking about the recent decision to hold social media companies liable, especially Meta, for misleading its consumers on their platforms and even endangering children. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Let's Talk New Mexico. I'm Taylor Velasquez. Next week, we'll discuss Job Corps programs, but today we're talking about social media safety after the Meta ruling. This morning, we've already heard from Attorney General Raul Torres, and we've also heard from Mark Berkman, and we're going to have a youth advocate here joining us live in a few moments this morning. But I want to go back to our guest, Mark Berkman here. We were talking a little bit before the break of all the different dangers that are out there on social media, but a big part of the initial investigation here in New Mexico used undercover agents posing as children, the youngest being 12 years old. These agents were contacted by men who would initiate sexually explicit conversations. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but are you seeing this often in your work? I know you've said sometimes children self-report, but how often is that happening?
Yeah, I mean, I would say in terms of sexually explicit content, sexual exploitation, what they call CSAM, so sexually explicit content featuring minors, CSEC, attempts to commercially sexually exploit minors. We see that happen with regularity over the major social media platforms. And the work that the Attorney General, New Mexico's Attorney General's office did here, I think, was really good. I would actually urge parents, I know people do not do this often, but I would urge people to go to the New Mexico complaint here and just look at the section. It's a fairly quick read on what the investigators found when they looked at Meta's platforms here in terms of sexual exploitation of minors. And it is jaw-dropping. I would give a very strong trigger warning for those that do that. But in 5 to 10 minutes, you can see kind of the breadth of the harm that is happening over these platforms when it comes to this particular danger. And in addition, the absolute lack of effort on the platform's part to protect their younger users. It's really appalling. But yeah, we see this in our everyday work. We are dealing with families that have been harmed by CSAM and CSEC with regularity. It is a really tragic situation that really urgently needs to be corrected.
And I'll actually introduce my next guest this hour, Zaman Qureshi, advocate for social media for teens and young adults. And in addition, he serves as co-chair for Design It For Us, a youth-led coalition to hold big tech accountable for harmful business practices. Good morning, Zaman. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
And, so far we've heard from the Attorney General and a little bit about our reaction from Mark there, but I want to get your reactions on what New Mexico has been doing, and especially from what we heard from this morning from Attorney General Torres.
Yeah, I think the ruling and the verdict in New Mexico is significant because it's the first time in the country that we have had a verdict handed out by a jury of ordinary people who listened to the evidence that was presented across trial and found that Meta was liable for failing to protect the mental health, to protect the safety of young people on its platforms. And, time and again throughout the trial, there was evidence that was presented that showed that employees inside Meta knew exactly the harms that its products were causing, but failed to take action. And so, across the many lawsuits that are being brought around the United States, this feels like a moment of reckoning for these companies in a time where, for many years, they were able to evade accountability and avoid regulation. And for the first time now, these civil penalties are being brought out, and that there is actually reforms on the table to change the business model and the practices of these companies. So I believe that these are very significant, and that there is a tide shifting in our country right now.
I think the big part of the New Mexico lawsuit was the awareness brought to the design features of social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram that made it easier for predators to find children online. But can you walk us through what those design features actually look like? I mean, is it just the algorithms that are being pushed by Meta, or what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, so, Instagram is a product that is designed to be addictive. It is designed to keep younger users engaging on the product for longer periods of time because Meta, the parent company of Instagram, gets to make more money the longer that a user spends on its product. And so when Meta enables things like push notifications, endless scroll, addictive-like features, features that quantify your self-worth or make you feel worse about yourself, those are designed to keep users on the product for longer and longer, keep them coming back. And the harms that were found in this case and were talked about throughout the course of trial were a recognition that addictive design is a lot of the exacerbating effects of a lot of these harms. And so, in particular for predators who are trying to contact or find young people on Instagram, many times it is Instagram's own algorithm that is recommending these accounts to adult strangers. And these are changes that Meta could make tomorrow if they chose. Meta could decide that its algorithm should not recommend adult strangers to young people and vice versa. And oftentimes, what was found in this case was that these people were posing to be children in an effort to exploit other young people on Instagram. These are changes that, through design feature and design-like regulation, could actually improve the kinds of experiences and the safety that young people have on Instagram. Unfortunately, Meta has not made those changes, and when they do say that they're making changes, we don't have any way to independently verify that they are actually standing by their public commitments. And it was very clear throughout the evidence that came out from this trial that they are avoiding and evading a lot of that accountability.
And Zalman, I'll go back to you. Your generation hasn't really known a world without these types of platforms. And of course, you brought up the addictiveness of something like this. But how do you think that experience has affected and impacted your peers?
Yeah, so I had the opportunity to testify as the final witness for the state of New Mexico in this case. And part of my testimony was to talk about what it was like to grow up as a young person on these products when safety is not the expectation, when the guardrails that should keep us safe on these products don't exist. And, that experience that I had as a 23-year-old, as a young person who was growing up on these products, it felt very benign at the beginning. It felt like these products were designed to build connection and to allow us to find friends and build community online. And very quickly, I think that experience changed as companies realized that they could make more money off of us by keeping us engaged for longer, by enabling a lot of these design features that increase the amount of time that we spend. And so, when you're growing up on these products and you are kind of forced to quantify your self-worth through likes and to curate an image of what you want to see or what other people you think would want to see about you, it puts a social pressure on you that is incredibly difficult to, as a young person, to have to kind of figure out. And then you add into that the fact that you are constantly kind of being bombarded with people that you don't necessarily know are people from your age group or people that you went to school with, and trying to figure out if someone you're connecting with is a friend or is a predator is a deeply dark place to be connecting with people online. And so, social media companies bear the responsibility and bear the brunt here. And, my testimony was also about ensuring that Meta is held accountable for its public statements. It rolled out something called Instagram Teen Accounts at the end of 2024 to talk about, or to try and improve, or what it said was to try and improve the teen experience on Instagram. Our research at Design It For Us found that Instagram Teen Accounts failed to prevent sensitive content on its products in 5 out of 5 of our test teen accounts. And so for us, I think it's clear that the measures of accountability have to be through litigation, through regulation at the state and the federal level, and that they be focused on the design of the ways that these products are being built, because they ultimately are products that companies are building.
Right. And you mentioned the teen accounts, you mentioned just kids just being inundated online and just signing up for these things, not realizing how dark it can get real quick. But do you think parents should have more of a responsibility or involvement in monitoring their kids' social media?
Verdicts have come out that, this is about parents' responsibility, and it's parents' responsibility to keep kids safe on these products. I think it's important that parents have conversations with their kids about the dangers of social media and the risks involved when joining these products. But ultimately, parents don't have the time, the resources, and the onus should not be on parents to have to figure out how to create a safe experience for their child. Many times it's just not feasible for parents to be constantly looking over the shoulder of their kids to view every piece of content or connect with every person on a certain product. And so the onus and the responsibility really has to fall on these companies, on social media companies, to build safer products. When we give teenagers the opportunity to drive for the first time, it is not on parents to ensure that the car that they are driving is safe. It's on the automobile company, and it's on the regulators to ensure that there are seatbelts in cars. That's what we're asking for social media companies, that there be seatbelts in place, and that the onus be on the companies themselves through regulation and through litigation to ensure that they're actually building safe products.
And Mark, I'll follow up here with you. You're on the ground kind of filling that gap between what social media platforms are now being held liable for and trying to get in contact with kids online, their parents, just trying to, like I said, bridge that gap. But, we saw these investigations, Operation Metafile, but are these investigations prominent? Do they happen all the time? And are they successful?
Yeah, I think in terms of the investigation, we have attorneys general across the country doing work like this. New Mexico was the first case where we were able to see a verdict here. But law enforcement is involved in a lot of places, and that is very crucial. And what that has done, in addition to the potential deterrence impact on the platforms themselves to start improving both their design side and their trust and safety side. It's teaching the public and helping raise awareness about what's actually happening on these platforms. And I think parents today would really be shocked at what they find that New Mexico's investigators found. But this is, to be clear, this is happening across the country. And we certainly, because we have a footprint in schools nationwide, and we are working with many thousands of teens and families nationwide, we do find issues and surface them up as well. But it really feels like a never-ending stream of harm that is happening on the ground. And while parents out there may now realize there is some risk to social media and teens as well, the actual understanding still has not fully materialized. And so I think the ongoing public awareness piece of this is very important, and the investigations are helping that as well.
And something that your work has in common alongside the Attorney General here in New Mexico is approaching this as a consumer safety issue. And what does that mean in practice, and how different is that from how tech companies are approaching safety now?
Well, tech companies, in terms of how they approach safety now, and shouldn't say tech, I would say kind of social media platforms, which we try to focus on tech. There are actually tech companies working on safety specifically, but tech companies have an inherent conflict of interest between our children's safety and their profits. And they want to maximize their profits, and our children's time and our time as well is profit to them. They monetize that and they sell that to advertising companies. So they want our children on the platforms as long as possible. And that's why we see all those features designed to increase engagement, which we now know are negatively impacting mental health. There are companies, I should point out, and as Zaman kind of alluded to this as well, that the issue with parents being able to responsibly supervise social media use and the difficulty of doing that on a day-to-day basis with all the content being generated by teens and flowing over social media accounts. And the gold standard recommendation to parents is to provide that responsible supervision. We see that from expert organizations like the American Psychological Association. It's what we teach as well. Given the range of acute harms that can lead to death, and we've seen that happen in thousands of cases. And so kind of that need for some level of oversight for our tweens and young teens when they're on platforms really is essential. And you asked about tech in general, you have safety software companies like Bark, like Bright Canary, that can do that work really for parents and send alerts only when the child is at imminent risk for a very real harm. So those tech companies are fully aligned with families in terms of safety. It's something we're working on in Congress on a bill called Sammy's Law, which is a very important piece of the safety puzzle here that we need to consider as well.
And I'm going to pause the conversation right here. This is Let's Talk New Mexico on 89.9 KUNM. We're discussing the impacts of the recent Meta ruling and what comes next as the state continues to hold the company liable for safety changes to its platforms. We'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to Let's Talk New Mexico on KUNM. We're discussing what comes next as the state is preparing to head back to court to demand more monetary damages out of Meta and safety changes to its platforms. On the panel this morning, we have heard from Attorney General Raul Torres, who joined us through the Here and Now show on NPR, but we also have Mark Berkman and Zaman Qureshi here. There's still some time to call in this morning for parents. When you're hearing the show, what is the hardest part about monitoring your child's social media use? Is it time to trust or keeping up with technology that's the issue here? You can call us and let us know at 505-277-5866. And Zaman, I'll go back to you. Before you mentioned that you had testified in New Mexico's case, but moving forward, when we're seeing other court cases come out of California, what steps are next when holding companies accountable?
Yeah, so I think that the litigation plays a crucial role here, but it's a first step. And so the fact that you have verdicts handed out in New Mexico and California, in California, it was a plaintiff, a young woman named Kaylee, who's 20 years old, who testified in her own case and very bravely shared her own story in front of a lot of harm to her mental health too. These are the kinds of cases that are moving through the courts right now, both at the state and the federal level. But we can't stop there. We need regulation in this space. We need to ensure that companies are held accountable for the business model that they are responsible for designing and building. And that is where we at Design It For Us believe in design-based legislation to hold these companies accountable for their design features and put the onus on them to actually design safer experiences for young people. These are some of the companies who have the best minds in the world working on this stuff, and we know that it is possible because, as we've seen from these trials, these companies have employees who have built a lot of the tools and features that can keep young people safe on these products, whether that is, turning off like counts by default, stopping endless scroll, ensuring that algorithms can be curated, and ensuring that recommendation algorithms for connecting people ensure that there is actually a safe experience for young people, keeping them away from adult predators. And so these are just some of the design features that we think are possible. We have supported a model of legislation called the Age-Appropriate Design Code across the United States. There was a bill introduced in New Mexico as well. And, in and across the United States, we believe that this model of age-appropriate design can actually hold these companies accountable. And we've seen it pass in California and Maryland, in Vermont, and Nebraska and South Carolina. So there's really a tide shift going on right now in looking to hold these companies accountable.
And what I'm hearing so far this morning from both you and Mark is that, these are fixable issues, but do you think at, Congress at that level, are they really thinking this is a huge issue? Are they taking it seriously and, rethinking social media safety?
Yeah, for a long time now, we've seen over the past few years, Congress hold a lot of hearings related to this issue. They have hauled in the big tech CEOs on a number of occasions to answer questions. But I really do think that these verdicts in these cases have highlighted Congress's quite abject failure to act on this issue. As attorneys general and plaintiffs are taking action to actually change the incentives of these companies. And for the past year or so, our Congress has instead advocated for things like pushing state regulatory AI amnesty, restricting access to social media, or shifting responsibility to other companies while watering down a lot of social media legislation that would actually tackle the core design. We've failed to do things like achieve broad antitrust reform or comprehensive privacy. So we hear a lot of talk from Congress on this issue. We have yet to see a lot of action. And, there are only a couple months left in this congressional session, and we have still yet to see legislation that would definitively regulate these companies pass the body. I do think, though, that these lawsuits and these verdicts have started to put pressure again on Congress to act, because people are seeing in New Mexico and California that whether it's the state or plaintiffs are taking this issue much more seriously than it looks like the Congress is taking it right now.
And you mentioned the push for AI, and that's something we've seen the Trump administration recently have a great push behind. But do you have any sense on the Trump administration's perspective on these types of issues with social media platforms? Do you think it's a priority for the administration?
Yeah, I think we've seen different perspectives from different people within the administration. Unfortunately, though, a lot of the regulatory action that we've seen come out of the administration has been trying to curtail regulatory power for years now, or over the past year, rather. The administration has attempted to try and pass a regulatory provision that would preempt states or prevent states from passing rules to actually regulate AI companies when some of the strongest rules are being written by the states. And so, to us, this is an indication that regulation does not appear to be a priority from the administration when they are taking these steps. The administration released a framework on artificial intelligence regulation that, again, would create a lot of risk to states that have passed stronger rules in this area, especially in the child safety and the child protection areas. Chatbots present a lot of risk to young people because they are so human-like in nature and have the ability to mimic very human-like experiences and conversations. And for young people who don't necessarily know or recognize in a deep conversation with a chatbot that they remember or are engaging with a chatbot, that can present a lot of risk. We've seen suicide in some cases, and there are families that are trying lawsuits in those cases as well. And so, we really believe that this is an area where, again, more regulation is needed, not less. And this is not about harming innovation. Companies can continue to innovate in the AI space, but they need to do so responsibly, and they need to do so with transparency and with safeguards. And so we are also working on legislation in this area at the state and the federal level.
And Mark, I'll follow up with you here. We saw the documents from the New Mexico Department of Justice basically leading to 100,000 children every day are subjected to some sort of sexual harassment on its platforms. And, what we've discussed so far this morning is that there is the technology to do things that the Attorney General is pushing for, like removing the predators from the platforms, doing an effective age verification. But, I think the most basic question here is, why haven't they done this so far? Is it more of a cost thing? Does it hinder profits? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think again, in theory, though, we do have evidence from whistleblowers that these decisions on design and safety features are being decided against concerns about profit and usage and engagement. And one of the really important facets of these cases is that we've been able to see evidence, internal documentation from the companies themselves, indicating that they put profits ahead of these design choices and safety features and protocols. We also have a number of whistleblowers out there, Sarah Wynne Williams, Arturo Bejar, that have informed us that this is what's happening inside the companies as well. So the very simple answer to your question is that yes, as Aman said, they can be doing a number of things on the company side to significantly mitigate the harm that we are seeing, including age verification, removing like buttons that drive a lot of dangerous behavior, among a number of other actions. They do not do that. The reason they do not do that is simple, and it is profit.
And I'll follow up with you again. Parents who are listening right now, I'm sure, feel overwhelmed about what's going on out there. But what are one or two concrete steps that they can take today to keep their kids safe on social media?
Yeah, we do have a very comprehensive free virtual course on our website at socialmediasafety.org. So that would be one tip there. Parents need to understand the full range of dangers that threaten their children so that they can better protect them. That course helps with that. And then for tweens, younger teens on various platforms, and remember, most of the gaming platforms today are social media and have these risks as well for children. For a range of these platforms, consider third-party safety software as well. It's a really essential part of the safety equation here, and again, can raise to parents only when imminent risks are threatening children, So like we talked about, the sexual exploitation risks, predators, severe cyberbullying that triples the risk of suicide for children. All of those risks can be elevated to the parent through third-party safety software in a way that actually enhances privacy over the status quo. And we've seen on the ground save numerous lives. So look into that if you're struggling with these issues with your children. There are many other recommendations as well that parents need to consider to fully protect their child. That you can find that through a number of sources, including on our website and in our course as well.
And I know we've even heard from Meta earlier this hour through their statement that there are safety tools in place, but obviously from what we've heard so far this hour, and of course the Attorney General's lawsuit here, that these are falling short. So in your opinion, what social or safety tools are in place right now, and how can they be better as we wait for Meta to go back to court in May?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the platforms need to make sure, most of them, to be clear, need to make sure that children under the age of 13 are not on the platform. So we see most children under 13 at that 11, 12-year-old range are indeed using major social media platforms, even though the platforms themselves say that they are not safe enough to be using at those ages. That is a very immediate way that platforms can help protect children from these harms. And then again, if you look at what the New Mexico Department of Justice did here in their investigation and just what they showed, we find again and again that the platforms are not taking down content that poses severe risk to children, even when it is reported. And we passed some legislation in California that helps create a triage reporting process that requires manual review by the companies, not just running it through AI, so that they can start taking it down better. But that age verification piece and taking down content that poses risk of severe and imminent harm, those are two basic things. But you just asked me for two, I believe, but there are a range of actions that the platforms need to take. So it's challenging for me to limit it to just two, but I would mention those explicitly.
And I mean, right now we're in kind of a limbo state where the case isn't quite done yet. But in your opinion, where do you think the biggest impacts are coming from right now? Teaching users to be safe or forcing platforms to change?
I think that this really requires a comprehensive, holistic approach. And one is not necessarily more important than the other. If we're going to have children on social media, and so that education piece is crucial, especially around raising awareness of the range of harms. Most people still can't name the full range of harms there, and a child cannot protect themselves from a harm if they do not know what it is. So education is crucial. I think as Saman very articulately laid out, the number of design decisions that the platforms need to make here to enhance safety, the number of design changes, that is also critical. You can significantly mitigate the amount of children we are seeing harmed. And to be clear, the amount of children harmed is in the millions. You can mitigate that substantially with these design decisions. So you really do need accountability on the platform side. You need education, and you need to improve the safety technology on the third-party side as well and make that more comprehensive and accessible. All three of those pieces are critical for the ultimate goal at the end of the day of making sure that no children are harmed by getting onto social media and wanting to communicate with their friends and explore interests and hobbies. So that is the ultimate goal. You need all three pieces there, to be clear.
And we only have a few more minutes left here in the hour, but to kind of head towards last thoughts here, Zaman, if lawmakers or even companies got this right, what would a safer social media experience look like for young people?
Yeah, a safer social media experience for young people would look like a place where young people can thrive, where they can connect with one another in a safe way, where they can represent their interests and desires without having to constantly feel like they need to compare themselves to one another or quantify their self-worth. It would look like an experience that allows you to connect with communities that allow you to learn new things and discover kinds of content that you want to see. And it also looks like an experience that allows you to take a step away from social media, that allows you to do other things in your life, like read a book, go spend time with friends, do your homework, play a sport, do an activity that you care about. You know, I think so much of what we've seen from these lawsuits is that these companies have intentionally designed their products to be addictive, and young people have been crying out for more control, more agency back in their life. I think if you ask most young people how they feel about the status quo, they'll tell you the status quo isn't working, that things need to change in order to for them to have a safe experience, but for, quite frankly, for the next generation to have a safe experience. There are going to be new emerging technologies that young people will access in the next generation, this coming generation, and it's incumbent on us as a society that is looking to look out for our young people to build products that actually put young people at the core, at the center of the way that they are designed.
And Mark, I'll head back to you for last minute thoughts. We have about a minute here, but as Zaman just mentioned, these are addictive products. What do you envision for the future if changes to the platform happen after the lawsuit here in May?
Yeah, I mean, we're in a bit of uncharted territory here because basically we've just added a level of accountability to the platforms for their design features, a duty of care. We saw that both in the New Mexico case, but on the duty of care side, specifically in the Los Angeles case, that will be appealed. So there's some uncertainty there, to be clear. But hopefully we're going to start seeing in those, because of those verdicts alone, some design changes happen here that's going to better protect children. It's not the sole answer to the safety question, as I mentioned. There are other facets that need to happen. You're not going to get to 0 children harmed because of this change.
I'm going to have to pause you right there,
alone.
Mark. We've run out of time this morning, unfortunately, but thank you to everyone who had shared your thoughts. And of course, thank you to our guests, Mark Berkman and Zaman Qureshi. This show was made possible by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation and KUNM listeners like you. Let's keep the conversation going. You can search KUNM Radio to comment on Facebook and look for KUNM News on Instagram and TikTok, or email letstalk@kunm.org. If you missed part of the show today, you can stream it on our website or subscribe to our podcast on Spotify or Apple. And you can find our whole episode this morning on YouTube. Just search at KUNM Radio. Our engineer this morning was Marino Spencer. Floria Knowles screened your calls. Ty Bannerman produced. And next week we'll discuss Job Corps programs and the opportunities available there. I'm Taylor Velasquez. This is Let's Talk New Mexico on 89.9 KUNM.